Shana Tova Ubituka is what we have said throughout the generations when celebrating and observing the beginning of a Jewish New Year, a good and sweet year. Throughout most of our lives, we have taken that greeting for granted because even though in each of our lives there have been good times and more difficult times, overall it was completely to be expected that the upcoming Jewish year would be mostly filled with security, like we have a lot of outside. We all know that in almost 2 years, if we're honest, several years before that, Shana Tova Umituka has not been a given, but a prayer. It is because of this, and because none of us can avoid the discomfort and living in a kind of disbelief, that I want to spend tonight sharing some of the legacy of my parents who lived through the Holocaust and were among the most upbeat people I have ever encountered. I felt them with me every day, especially since October 7th, remembering the stories that they told me and always, always sharing the personal strength and optimism that we all need and deserve now. I began to think more deeply about what I can learn from their experiences in the past to today's world when my mother, Gertrude, was included in a fascinating book recently published called I Seek a Kind Person. I've always known that my mom at age 14 was sent on the Kindertransport from Vienna to London. Her father, Karl, had been taken to Dachau right after Kristallnacht, but fortunately was later released. He hid people in their large apartment that had secret rooms, but refused to hide, and instead stood proud as an Austrian Jew. But I never knew, and neither did she, I think, because she never said anything about it, that her father and her mother, Sophie, had earlier placed an ad in the Manchester Guardian asking for someone in England to foster their only child, my mother. I hope that during the next year, I can share more of the story in that book with you so that we can learn together. Being involved with that book heightened my understanding of the choices people have to make, and with those choices, how they plan to survive and even thrive at difficult times. My mom lived in a house subsidized by a church group and went to school in London, made friends, and even had the chutzpah to ask the house mother to please provide kosher food for the house full of Jewish girls. She survived the Blitz when the sponsors moved them into the country, and then came the day when, against all expectations, she was contacted that a ship had one space available for her in Liverpool, which was not at all close to where she was located, if she could make it there within a relatively small number of hours. She managed to reach the ship, which would take her to Shanghai, China, to which her parents had escaped. She made it, got on the ship exhausted, fell asleep, and then heard the sirens for incoming bombs, she thought. She was with other girls on the bottom level of the ship, and when she woke, they let her know that the siren was the all clear, and she had slept through a horrible port bombing, which the ship survived. But when she told the rest of the story of the ship's 3-month travel, she also shared how wonderful it was to be with so many young people, all headed to safer China, where their British parents worked. They had fun, despite being on a ship dodging sea mines. They were not naive, but they chose to have fun, to be strong, and to enjoy life. My mother and father, Theo Rolf, later Theodore, met in Shanghai where his family had fled to from Berlin. My father and my grandfather had to run for days after Kristallnacht, only staying in one place for literally a few minutes, from trains to buses and on foot. Their family store was destroyed by Nazi vandals. Soon after, my father at age 19 opened the door one day to find two Gestapo men looking for a Jewish neighbor. The man wasn't there, but everyone knew that they would take anyone that they had found. My father experienced a miracle that he never forgot. The two men first asked, "May we come in?" instead of pushing their way in to look around. Then they talked to each other and said to my father, "Do you have any other doors out of this house? Do you understand us? Do you have any other doors out?" He understood then that they were telling him to run away, and he did. He said that those men were probably forced into the Gestapo and didn't want to do what they were charged to do. My dad said that his whole life he prayed for those men who saved him. After that, my grandmother had talked to her husband Hugo and my dad and his sister Gerda and told them on a few days after Kristallnacht that she was going out and was going to get passage to somewhere, anywhere, no matter what it took. And lo and behold, a strong and determined woman. She came home with passage to Shanghai, which was almost impossible to get, as it was the only place in the world where Jews could go, as their passports had been confiscated by the Nazis, and China did not require a passport. An example of his family's dedication to living life, no matter the situation, was by his mother, Keita, on the ship to China. On days when the waves sent people rushing to their rooms with nausea, she said, "Alexanders don't get seasick." We don't know what we will find in China, but here on the ship, we have food and drink, and she sat them down at the dinner table in an almost empty dining room, and they ate and drank and didn't get nauseous. As their ship docked in Shanghai, they looked out at the very then modern high-rise buildings on the Bund, and my grandmother said to my dad, "Look, this is a real city. You'll certainly get work here." He actually got an amazing job, and the optimism continued. At the beginning, life in China was really pretty good. However, the Japanese invaded and took over Shanghai, and all the Jewish residents were transferred to a ghetto since Japan was Germany's ally in the war. In the ghetto, the Jews were welcomed by the Chinese residents, and in the midst of true poverty, starvation, and no knowledge of what was to come, the Jews made real friendships with the Chinese neighbors at a time when races did not mix. The Jewish community also created choirs, libraries, synagogues, discussion groups, schools, and more to make life go on and to not shrink into devastating fear. It was in Shanghai that my father finished rabbinical school. His yeshiva in Berlin had been shut down. I look at that as being the ultimate in optimism. Men studying to serve synagogues when they had just seen all of theirs be destroyed in Germany. My parents fell in love and planned for a future in the midst of bombings and having basically a starvation diet and no clean water. They decided to collect stamps as a hobby together, particularly in the evening when the bombing was heavier. They couldn't use electricity, so they sorted stamps under the light of a candle. They said it was a good diversion, and my mother and father added, and romantic too. One of their cramped buildings actually got hit, but thankfully there were no injuries. After the war, they were able to be admitted to the US, and they came and settled in Northern California, which they loved. While they obviously shared all these stories with me and wrote about their experiences, when we went as a family to Austria and Germany when my daughter Shira was 12 and Eliza was 6, we did not spend any time talking about what they had to flee, but rather we explored the places they lived, learned, and enjoyed in the year before the Shoah. But that's who they were, not ignoring the horrors of their lives, but instead avenging their enemies by building lives of meaning, joy, and love, and also pride in their Jewishness. The first time my dad went to Munich, which was the capital of the Nazis, the birthplace of the Nazi Party, he took the steps up to the headquarters building, put on his talit and tefillin, and davened shacharit. He told me it was his way of saying, "We are still here, and you are not." This kind of optimism in difficult times, when it would be understandable to lose faith, has existed in Judaism throughout the millennia. In Midrash, there is a tremendous affirmation of optimism when, after Bnei Yisrael crossed the Sea of Reeds, having been chased by the Egyptians and terrified for their lives, what do the women do? They start a party. In the book of Shemot, Exodus, it says, "V'tikach Miriam ha'neviah achot Aharon et hatof biyada v'titzaena chol hanashim acharecha b'tupim uvim solot." Then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a drum in her hand, and all the women went out after her, dancing with drums. The Midrash wonders how this worked. Miriam took a drum in her hand. But how did the people Israel have drums with them in the wilderness? It's because the righteous people were totally faithful and confident that God would perform miracles for them at the time they went out of Mitzrayim, Egypt. So they prepared their drums in advance. The Midrash notices that Bnei Yisrael needed a lot more miracles to save them even after they made it through the sea. But Miriam and the righteous people seemed to have complete faith that they would be saved. The faith could not come easily, but they were determined to be optimistic. There are many such texts of idealism and trust in thousands of years of Jewish teaching. In our day now, there are also people who have encountered real anti-Semitism rather than to have just heard about it and still remain optimistic. I, for one, still have not had anyone rant at me or try to harm me in any way, even though every day I'm deliberately covered in a Magen David, a necklace for the hostages, Zionist pins, and bracelets. I'm fortunate right now, as are all of us who have not experienced that, but many others have not been. Governor Josh Shapiro stood strong and proud after his gubernatorial home experienced anti-Semitic arson on Pesach. Numerous people, particularly Orthodox Jews who are easy to spot, have been beaten up and their homes vandalized. They do not hide. We all know about the issues with students in most universities throughout the world. We also, thank God, are aware of the number of university new Jewish groups who are there for the students and teach them how not to cower, but be proud and strong. There are numerous organizations, such as Jew Belong, that have been stalwart in reinforcing that we must stand tall, stay strong, and be joyful about who we are. Club Z for Teens, established a few years ago, is strong and wonderfully supportive nationwide now for teen social connections, and also teaches and stresses a commitment to Zionism with no apologies and advocates for the Jewish people. A writer in the London Jewish Chronicles shared an awe-inspiring thought. Optimism isn't ignoring reality. It's refusing to surrender to it. Jewish joy is not naive. It's not Pollyanna optimism. It is, in fact, radical. And then the author said, the rabbi I loved the most used to say that a Jewish joke was the highest form of prayer because finding light in darkness isn't frivolous. It's sacred. It's tikkun olam, the stubborn belief that the world can be healed even when it looks beyond repair. In small town in England, Bournemouth, a Chabad rabbi was leaving the house to go to shul when they discovered, as he said, that some cowards visited our home on Friday night and decorated it with this symbol, in swastika spray painted. Obviously, this is very upsetting and alarming, he said, but he added, the good news is that by the time you see this news video, our wall will have been cleaned thanks to some amazing people from the community who came around to help clean it. The rabbi insisted that he would not be cowed by the incident. We will continue to live as proud Jews here in Bournemouth. I will continue to walk with my kippah on my head, and the mezuzah will remain on the door. And then he said, I want to encourage everyone to do exactly the same. Be proud of who you are. Be proud to be Jewish, and never allow the forces of darkness and forces of evil to instill fear into our hearts. We are so very fortunate to be who we are as a community, as a people. We know the beauty of our traditions and the responsibilities that God has given us to do mitzvot for each other and for others. We know the joy of a baby being born into the covenant we all have been given. We feel the beauty of a Shabbat dinner with friends and neighbors. We cherish weddings under the chuppah, followed by both the breaking of a glass to remind us that life has ups and downs, but also the wild joy of a hora and the bride and groom raised on chairs. We know the pride of family and friends and fellow congregants when a B'nai Mitzvah girl or boy proudly stand before us, chanting from the Torah and sharing their learning and ideas with us in their Devar Torah. Rabbi Akiva always offered this reminder to his disciples before beginning studies. It's found in Talmud, Sanhedrin 99b. Zemer bechol yom, zamer bechol yom. A song every day. A song every day. And Akiva's life and the life of his disciples wasn't very easy either. So indeed, even with all that is part of our Jewish world right now, we should never hesitate. Instead, we should share with others that we believe with the depths of our soul that this year will be, say it with me, Shana Tova Umituka, a good year and a sweet one.